The show is on!
JohnFord.radio.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Divided America, and all the sinking ships at sea. It's the John Ford Podcast, the Evening Rancor. Any links mentioned on the show are available at johnford.radio. Welcome to the Evening Rancor, the John Ford Podcast.
It's that time once again. Time for another Evening Ranker, the John Ford Podcast, with me, your rankerist, John Ford. That's me. It is podcast number 34, if you're keeping track, if you've got the bingo scorecard or the secret decoder ring. I don't know why anybody ever got rid of secret decoder rings. And on today's podcast, the John Ford Podcast, the Evening Ranker, me, your rankerist, John Ford, I'd like to go over something that we discussed a podcast or two ago, and that was the whole kerfluffle. Isn't that a great word, kerfluffle?
Yes.
Over Baby It's Cold Outside and how it's a rapey song. And it shouldn't be allowed on the radio. And then that radio station in Milwaukee or wherever it was banned it and got all the press. You know, they got what they wanted out of it. Do you think those guys that run that radio station, the program director, the general manager, whoever, really gave a damn whether or not the song was offensive? No, man, they just wanted the press, and they got the press because that's their job, to gather attention for themselves. But then it started to roll downhill and gather more steam, and, you know, some radio stations tested it, and yeah, the people said, well, we like the song. We don't think it's rapey. And then the same social socialists came out against Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
You all ought to be ashamed of yourselves.
This is not a joke, because they said that Rudolph was being bullied by the other reindeer. So you shouldn't have songs, things like that. It's a bad influence on people because we don't want people to get bullied. I'm surprised that PETA didn't come out against I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas, because obviously she was going to eat the hippopotamus. And the hippopotamus needs to roam free. It needs to be a free-range hippopotamus. The question is, where does this stuff ever end? If you're going to live your entire life around your worry of whether or not something should be offensive. I mean, take, for example, not even songs. How about movies? How about the 1940 movie, the classic movie with Cary Grant, The Philadelphia Story, where it shows Cary Grant in the beginning of the thing is he's pushing Katharine Hepburn's face into the ground. And I'm not saying she didn't deserve it.
He's right.
You're right.
In the movie. Maybe in real life. No, I shouldn't say that. But I should be able to say that if I wanted to. It's a movie. And it's showing the culture of the time. Do we always have to interpret yesterday's culture by what some people deem to be today's, and in quotation marks, correct culture? As if what we have today won't be corrected by somebody else with a different opinion tomorrow, or next week, or in 16 years. Mm-hmm. Should I Love Lucy be taken off of the air because of the way she always belittled Ricky? Huh? How about John Lennon with the Beatles and I'd rather see you dead, little girl, than be with another man?
That's not funny at all to me.
That's the end. 1965. You know, 1965 was that is a misogynist song, and that should never be played on the radio. Dog, what you barking at? Because that doesn't fit with how the social socialists view the world today. How about Gone with the Wind? I don't know nothing about burping no babies or burping no babies either.
So that means they can lay eggs that hatch into little babies without sexually reproducing.
Should that be played on TV? I don't think so, because that's going to be offensive to some people. I don't know who, but, early Charlie Chan movies. I mean, this list could just go on and on. It was only a few weeks ago that a lot of people were clamoring to get rid of Apu on The Simpsons. The South Asian convenience store owner, long voiced by Hank Azaria in The Simpsons. What's the problem with that? There was this guy, what was his, Harry Kondabundahundahundu. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Harry Kondabulu. He made a film called The Problem with Apu. Now, Apu is like one of the more normal characters on The Simpsons. It doesn't portray him as being some blithering idiot. It portrays him as being this kind of lovable guy. Where does this end? It doesn't end. And here's the real danger. The real danger is the social reconstructionists of today that want to have their opinion to be the one that matters, want to be able to rule over what everybody else deems appropriate and inappropriate. Sure, great. They can gain that power, and they can wield that power. But what happens when another group gains that power that they don't like? what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So let me gander at that thing a little while. That is the real danger. Not that I agree with these socialists and their viewpoints, but I may disagree more, and they may disagree more with whoever gains the power in the future. And you can take it back to the people that don't like the Civil War statues. But wait, let's take it back even further. Let's find something at fault with the great Greek philosophers. You can find fault with anything you want. You can find fault with any individual. Everybody's been bound to say something that you don't like at some point in their lives, and you can't let that just completely destroy everything that they have ever done in their lives. Dog, what's your problem? The danger is that someone may end up getting the power that you like even less, and stifling opinion and speech even more. And with all that being said, let's play something truly offensive on the Evening Ranker this week, the John Ford podcast, the late great Charlie Patton's Shake It and Break It.
You can hang it on the wall. And I don't want to cage it for ball, my jelly. My roll, feed mount and let it fall. Everybody have a jelly roll like mine. I live in town, I ain't got no brown. I don't want it down, my jelly. My roll, feed mount and let it fall. You can start to grab it, you can bring it, you can push it in the way that I can get it on. And my right mind says, I blow the town, my jelly. My roll, feed mount, or you let it fall. Just shake it, break it, hang it on the wall. And I don't want to keep on ball. You break it, you can hang it on the wall. And I don't want to keep on, my jelly. My roll, feed mount, or you let it fall. I ain't got nobody else but me and myself. They blew all the time, when the sun goes down, my jelly, my roll, feed my roll, let it fall. You can shake it, you can break it, you can hang it on the wall. And I don't want to kill you with ball. You can break it, you can hang it on the wall. I don't want to kill my jelly, my roll, feed my roll, let it fall. You can start it, you can grab it, you can bring it, you can twist it in the way that I can get it on. And my right mind, you want some time about the jelly, my roll, feed mama, don't you let it fall. Just shake it, you can break it, you can hang it on the wall. And I don't want to kill you with ball. You can break it, you can hang it on the wall. And I don't want to kill you with ball. My jelly, my roll, feed mama, don't you let it fall. I know I've been to town, I walked around, saw the ribbon town, I fooled around. My jelly, my roll, feed mama, don't you let it fall. Just shake it, you can break it, you can hang it on the wall. And I don't want to kill you with ball. You can break it, you can hang it on the wall. And I don't want to kill you with my jelly, my roll, feed mama, don't you let it fall. Just shake it, you can break it, you can hang it on the wall. And I don't want to kill you with my jelly, my roll, feed mama, don't you let it.
There's a late, great Charlie Patton on the Evening Ranker with John Ford, and I believe that is in the public domain. It's so hard to tell. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. Charlie was an interesting guy. Mr. Patton, probably what a lot of people would consider the original Delta blues guy. At least ones that we know about that were recorded. It's unfortunate that a lot of his recordings weren't of better quality, but they just aren't. But he was supposed to have been very animated when he played, sort of like Jimi Hendrix, except 50, 60, 70 years before that. He would play with his teeth. He would play with the guitar behind his head. He would dance around, jump around like crazy, and was supposedly very animated kind of guy. If you like the blues and are not familiar with Charlie Patton, I would recommend you finding them somewhere and getting them onto your phone or whatever it is you listen to music with these days. Now, I was talking briefly about public domain and copyright. Now, as the first of the year, the 20-year hiatus of copyright protection, 95-year-long copyright works released in 1923 finally are going to make it into the public domain. Talking about everything from like Charlie Chaplin films to Virginia Woolf to the song The Charleston. it's kind of crazy that it's almost 100 years later and it's now just reaching the public domain. Why is that? Most people are unaware of this. It's because in 1998, Congress extended the length of the copyright from 75 to 95 years, or from 50 to 70 years after the author's death.
Yuck.
And this was done by Sonny Bono of Sonny and Cher fame, who was also a politician and was infamously the guy who killed himself by running into a tree while skiing. Somehow this all fits together in a wonderful, weird sort of way. But yeah, the lawmakers were pressured allegedly into this by the Disney Corporation protecting Mickey Mouse.
That's right.
The first Mickey Mouse cartoons were released in 1928, and those rules extended Disney's control of that stinking little rat until 2023.
You all ought to be ashamed of yourselves.
But this year, on January 1st, 2019, those first works protected by that draconian law that was introduced by Congress, and I believe it was basically a unanimous decision. And you can't tell me it wasn't all about protecting that damn rat, that little stinking Mickey rat.
He's right. You're right.
So any of those songs and books and films that have gone through that 95-year exploratory, I mean, how silly is this? 95 years later. I can't remember the exact date, but I think if it wasn't for the copyright, because math is hard. Math is so hard.
I need help.
If it wasn't for the copyright extension passed by Congress, stuff from 1962 or 1963 or somewhere in the early to mid-60s would now be entering the public domain. Think about that. All that music would be public domain. And you'd be able to play it on your stinking podcast. And you'd be able to download it for free without fear of the jackbooted DMCA guys banging down your door and arresting your grandmother for torrents.
My grandfather says your country will one day choke on the vomit of your capitalist excess.
Needless to say, copyright law is not simple, it's just insane.
Because of time constraints, we move ahead in our program.
Say, did you see that the Netflix comedian on what I believe was his second show on Netflix in a series, his name is Hassan Minhaj. Excuse my Arabic. And I'm not familiar with the guy. Hassan Minhaj. Honest to God, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Anyways, his show called The Patriot Act has been removed from Netflix in Saudi Arabia following a legal demand which reportedly said it violated Saudi anti-cybercrime law. In other words, he said mean, nasty, hurtful things about the Saudi royal family. So Netflix has banned him and his show from airing in Saudi Arabia. They just cave. They just cave, man. They just cave. If you don't think that somebody needs to deal with the censorship that is happening on social media and the internet, then, man, you're living in a cave.
Admit it, admit it, admit it, admit it, admit it, admit it. Come on, admit it, admit it.
And I came across this morning. Michaela Peterson, who is the daughter of Jordan Peterson, the famous or infamous, depending on where your biscuit falls on the plate, Canadian psychotherapist and professor at the University of Toronto, who has caused such a kerfluffle and has become this kind of like intellectual rock star. I watch his stuff. I find it interesting. A lot of it's the same thing over and over, and the self-help stuff to me gets kind of boring. But he's a really bright guy. He reminds me a lot of C.S. Lewis in a way. I mean, he's very logical, although he doesn't have the religious connotations that Lewis did, of course.
I can't get with any religion that advertises in popular mechanics.
But anyways, Michaela Peterson, who is his daughter, and if I remember correctly, and forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but I think I'm somewhat correct. She has some sort of autoimmune deficiency. I think she's in her 20s. So she eats a diet, as does Jordan now, I think, for the most part, that is mainly meat-oriented. It's carnivorous. I mean, it's chewing on bloody dead animals. She wants to eat dead animals. So she does YouTube live chats and stuff about eating dead animals and how it's good for you. Dead animals are good for you.
Yes.
And if you belong to PETA, then sorry, I don't really give a damn. So anyways, she has been deplatformed as of today. That would be Wednesday, the 2nd of January 2019. Oh, golly.
Wow.
She has been deplatformed from YouTube for, I think, 3 months. 3 months. 1, 2, 3 months you're out. At the old censorship game. Excuse the singing. And this is causing a big thing. Now, she did something on one of her community guideline rules were broken. He did the same thing to me, except my dad is not Jordan Peterson, who has, let's see, how many followers does Jordan Peterson have on Twitter? 1.02 million followers.
Hallelujah.
And then he started tweeting about this. So it's fast and furious, man. Censorship is just the fun family thing to do today on the internet. God bless America. And Canada, too, of course.
Can I help you?
Yeah, I'm looking for a really big gun that holds a lot of bullets.
God bless you, young man.
It's the John Ford Podcast, the Evening Rancor.
JohnFord.radio.
And now, one of my least favorite, most favorite subjects, and that would be the concept of Facebook. I hate Facebook.
You hate all living things.
I had a Facebook account in the beginning, got rid of it, thought it was stupid, and then later came to realize that it was just evil. If you still have a Facebook account, shame on you. Shame on you.
Shame on you.
Get rid of that thing. There are other ways you can keep up with Aunt Edna. You don't need stinking Facebook. The sooner that Facebook erodes from existence on this planet, the better. Anyways, there was an article on MSN. Does that still stand for the Microsoft Network? I don't know. It's all kind of changed. I'm kind of surprised MSN's even still around. The article was on Facebook's rule book. Now, can you believe this? They have a rule book that oversees global political speech. Global political speech. They see themselves as the arbiters of global political speech. Quoting from the article, taking on the bonfires of hate. Who the hell said it was their jobs to do that? It sure as heck wasn't me. Who makes them the arbiters of what is and what isn't hate, or what should and what should not be said? And this goes for Twitter, too, and all the rest of them. All the rest of those draconian social media sites. Most of the article spotlights on countries outside of the U.S., but like I said, the big question is, who the hell asked or wants them to be the arbiters of speech? It's not me. Is it you? Now, I realize there are people that do believe that somebody should be the arbiters of speech. They think they should be the arbiters of speech, and that what they think counts. Well, the whole concept of free speech is that you're going to say something that's uncomfortable to somebody else. That's what free speech is all about. And who told Facebook that they can be the arbiters of what is good speech and bad speech? Now, check this out. They have 7,500 moderators. They employ 7,500 people who pull from a 1,400-page manual. I'm sure they're pulling a lot of other things underneath the desk as well. 1,400-page manual on what speech is allowed on Facebook. They do all this under the guise of being nice and getting rid of hate speech. Now, what exactly is hate speech? Let's go to the Funkin' Wagnalls. Speech expressing hatred of a particular group of people. I hate people that work at Facebook. I hate Facebook. Is that hate speech? Once again, it all goes for the collective, the tribe, the group, not the individual. It's, the individual is what's important in traditional, democratic, liberal societies. Our society is based around the individual. It's not based around the collective. This concept of the collective is a fairly new thing. And I would argue, as some do, that it comes from Marxism. Marxism is the boogeyman in this thing here.
Good Lord, you got a big hemorrhoid!
Democratic liberalism, Western liberalism is based around the individual. The individual is responsible, not the group, not the collective, where the individual matters. You have to ask yourself, 7,500 moderators from their 1,400-page manual. God, wouldn't you love to get a hold of that manual? So I could burn it. 7,500 moderators. You got to ask yourself, what's their background? Computer degrees? Social media degrees? I'm sure they have them. I'm sure you can go to school and get a social media degrees. I have got a master's and I'm working on my doctorate of twit.
Christ. 7 years of college down the drain.
I'll bet most of them come from humanities. Now, it would make more sense if they had a background in ethics or possibly a philosophy degree. Because then, and even not then, they might be a little bit more trustworthy in being arbiters of speech. But the interesting thing is that Facebook, Twitter, and their ilk, and they don't have to be a bad ilk, they've just become a bad ilk, maybe in for a rude awakening because the Supreme Court is hearing a case, and I believe it's going to be heard. They've taken it up in February, so I'm thinking sometime around the middle of February. Now, I'm not going to get into too much law here because I'm not a lawyer. I've never played one on TV, and I don't know a damn thing about it.
You got to be a Philadelphia lawyer, a diplomat, a psychologist, an expert on social behavior.
But it's Manhattan Community Access Corp versus Halleck, Halleck. I guess the gist of this, pulling from the Wikipedia page, it's a pending U.S. Supreme Court case related to limitations on First Amendment-based free speech placed by private operators. From what I'm able to read between the lines, this basically has to do with public access television. But they're saying that depending on how the Supreme Court rules on this, it could have wide-ranging implications for Facebook, Twitter, Google, and their ability, which they certainly have used, to censor free speech on the internet under the guise of hate speech, under the guise of, if it's something we don't like, you can't say it. So it'll be very interesting to see how the Supreme Court case turns out. Personally, I think they should be treated as a public square. And on a public square, you should have the right to any darn speech you want outside of yelling fire at a movie theater. That there is no such thing as hate speech. It is a concept that someone has invented. Uncomfortable speech is free speech. Well, I can't say that I hate something or someone or a group.
I hate you for not f***ing me.
They should not have the ability to arbitrarily say that you can or you cannot say something. At least not in this country. If you want to follow those kind of rules, go to Pakistan, go to who knows whatistan, and deal with those restrictions there. But we're supposed to have rights in this country. And on a public square, you have those rights. And the internet has become a public square. It is the de facto public square. I like this one quote from the article, which in reality I don't like, this particular quote.
No.
They quote Zuckerberg when he was in front of Congress. He said, quote, Facebook is a platform for all ideas. Well, according to this article and according to your 7,500 people in your 1,400-page instruction manual, it's obviously not a platform for all ideas. It seems like it's only a platform for the ideas that Facebook approves of. Not all ideas, only the ones Facebook likes.
Not suffering from insanity, enjoying every minute of it. JohnFord.radio.
For this is the province of combat, and these are the faces of war.
This program is for re-educational purposes only. Resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is probably intentional. Contents under pressure, use only as directed. Some assembly required. Void where inhibited. Batteries not included, use only as directed. If confusion persists, consult your physician. Driver does not carry cash. This disclaimer is subject to change without notice.